There was a common term used by the Hebrews to call God, because Jesus says, I go to my Father and your Father, my God and your
also have
God.
this in Arabic. All the Semite languages, they have this kind of
Abba.
Abba,
Yes.
Father. Doesn't mean or we.
Yes.
We
But-
say sometimes God in the Quran.
Yeah,
we say
but after that,
we, it doesn't mean like so many. We is like the respect in the Hebrew. They also have this respect.
But just to get over the confusion, Allah and His Rasul prohibited us to call God Father, because then Allah, you see what happened in Christianity and in Judaism, yes? What happened? They started to basically merge the creation with the Creator, and that is, Alhamdulillah, with the last messenger, that was very important.
And I think it was more to do with the Greeks, because the Bible was a Greek translation.
No, this is a Hebrew concept. The Father,
Well,
yeah.
he's got a point there, because it's when the Greek mind and the Roman way
Yeah,
of
because they
thinking
have the
came
gods
in.
and-
I'm not talking about the
exactly.
Trinity, I'm talking now about the concept of calling God the
yeah.
Father, Abba.
Yeah, Hebrew,
It's more of a Hebrew
Arabic,
concept.
Yeah.
Semite, all this.
Yeah.
But they translate the Bible. I think most of this, they say like God, the Father, all this. Some because the translation, because they had so many gods and stuff.
That's right,
So the
yeah.
concept
Greek
of
philosophy
how
came
to
in.
translate
Father and
was,
Son, yes.
is this, in this,
Because you had
that's
Zeus
what-
and Hercules and
Yeah,
so on.
that's what
So
made
this
the-
concept, it was very easy to merge for someone like Constantine. You know, Emperor Constantine, he was a key figure after whom Christianity kind of bloomed in
Council
Europe.
of Nicaea.
Yes.
325.
When did the Trinity actually get formed? Did it begin at Nicaea and then end up?
I think it formulated entirely,
Constantinople?
yeah, 381.
Yeah, that's
The year
the next
381.
bit. But in the 321, they made
Started
all.
to-
Yeah.
Well,
So the Holy Spirit was still doubtful whether he was part of the Trinity, part of God or not. But it was established firmly in the Council of
It was thanks to
Constantinople.
his mum, isn't it? Helen or something. They had the next one, the 381.
Allah
This,
Alam. But Constantine was the main key player and the key emperor, because you know when an emperor takes on a religion, then the common people kind of
He was not a believer
follow.
at that time. You see, that's the thing.
Before that, no, he wasn't.
Well, in the 325, he was not, because they said like he took baptized Christianity on his bed when he was
Deathbed,
dying.
Oh yeah, it was towards the end.
Actually, he was there more than, because there are so many rioting.
It was more to unite
It's
the
political more
Yes,
than anything.
exactly.
Because
To unite the-
Christianity starts.
kingdom under one ruler
And then
with one
that's where they
religion.
throw so many other gospels. There used to be hundreds of gospels, and they choose only the four.
Yeah, let's come back to the
Okay,
point.
yeah.
We're going so many different tangents.
And some of them
Yeah.
they didn't believe. The Arius, as an example,
Yes,
they
yes.
said God is one. And
So you had
Jesus
Athanasius
was
and
not.
Arius,
Jesus was
two
like
different.
subordinate to the
Yeah.
So the Trinity
Demigod.
itself is an evolution. So first they believed in a Unitarian God, then it became a Binitarian, and then a Trinitarian. So it kind of evolved over the 300 years, 400 years actually. 4th century was it was established. Can you believe the central doctrine of a religion has to take 300 years, 325 years, or 380 years for it to be established firmly as to what the core doctrine is, let alone the other beliefs?
Well, this is the same thing we have in Islam also with the Shia things. It's only in the 3rd century that when the Shia starts coming in.
Yeah, but even the Shias believe in the oneness
No,
of God
no, I
and
mean,
in the Rasul.
Yeah.
So our core doctrine, which is the Shahada, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, whether they're Shia or Sunni, they all believe in this. So our core doctrine was firmly established from the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the last and the most important thing, which I also find to be unjust in Christianity, is the atonement through human sacrifice.
Oh, he was died.
Yes,
Died for.
because if you remember that verse in the Bible where it says there is no forgiveness without the shedding of blood. Hebrews chapter 9 verse 22. You remember that, Chris? Yeah. What do you make of that? Do you think God is able to forgive without killing a human being? That to an innocent human being?
Well, when you read the Old Testament, there was the shedding of blood, animals, bulls,
Yeah. Those were mostly for
sacrifices. So there was a requirement for blood to be spilled.
no, but those were
A lot of
mostly
people
for
say to me,
unintentional
well-
sins. If you read it carefully, for example, if you committed murder in the Old Testament time, or you committed adultery, you can't just cut a goat and get away with it. Yes, you had to be stoned to death. That was a command. That was a law. So you see, intentional sins, that too, major sins like this, you can't get away with it. And that too, you know what happened during the Passover? What happened was they used to have 2 goats, 2 sheep or 2 ram or whatever it is, yes? One of them, they will sacrifice for the temples, for the priests in the temples, yes? Not for all of Israel. And the other sheep, they'll let go. They'll let go into the wilderness.
It's an scapegoat.
Yeah, that's where the term scapegoat comes from. Yeah, and this is what the norm was. So even if you look at Leviticus, where these sacrifices are mentioned, it talks about people who cannot even afford doves as sacrifice. You know, doves, little pigeons. Yeah, even that, it didn't cost much compared to the sheep and the ram. They cost much more, even back then. So even those people who cannot afford that, what were they allowed to do? Bring flour, from which you make bread, and you can put that on the altar. That has got no blood. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Others will be eating bread full of blood.
So what happened in the tabernacle when you had the high priest that
exactly.
went into the
This is what
Holy
they
of
would-
Holies?
yeah.
Did he not take blood and put it on the mercy seat?
Yes, they would.
As a symbol of forgiveness for the people that he was representing.
Yeah, that's
he
what
went
I'm
in
saying.
once a year.
It was
didn't he?
meant for the priests, and the priests are representing the people.
That's right,
But
the high
important-
priest.
Yeah, but most of those were for unintentional sins. So if you look at Leviticus 5, I believe, it specifically mentions the unintentional sins over there. And then it talks about the other sins, which you cannot be forgiven with, just by this sacrificial ritual. So again, going back to human sacrifice, God used to completely rebuke those people who used to commit human sacrifice back then in the Old Testament times. They used to sacrifice to Baal or whatever gods. And God says he has never even imagined, he never even thought about giving this command of giving human sacrifice. And then when you get the New Testament, that becomes a doctrine for you. Without that, you cannot be forgiven. And I say that is very unfair, specifically to the person who is being sacrificed. Yes, the person who did nothing, he was free from all charges, free from sins, free from anything, any blemish whatsoever. But he is the one who pays for the ones who actually commit the sins.
But then why was he unblemished? Why was he without sin? There has to be a reason why he was without sin.
He's a prophet of God.
No, not prophets weren't sinners.
All prophets, according to Islamic belief, they did not commit sins. What sins you're talking about might be unintentional sins, yes. Minor sins might be, but major sins, specifically.
I'm not about any sin.
No, look, when you say any sin, yes, doesn't God himself say that all mankind are sinners? We all commit sins.
Where does he say that?
It says in the Hadith, I'm sure it says in the Old Testament as well.
Romans, isn't it?
Yeah.
All have fallen short of God's standard, all have sinned.
Oh yeah, in the New Testament, in Romans.
Oh yeah.
So this is something that it's our nature to sin. However, prophets are specific. They are special people who have been appointed by God. So when God gives them the message directly, yes, God also protects them from these sins. And this is the reason we believe that God establishes his covenant with them. So in fact, in Christianity, in the Old Testament as well, you see many prophets sinning, yes, committing incest, I don't know, David even committing murder and adultery. I think that,
Corrupt, is it? Or
well, that is,
story?
we don't believe that is true. So yes, you can say that's correct. Because that is not the Quranic story, that is from the Bible. We don't believe someone as mighty messenger as David would commit such adultery.
Well, I think that's a powerful story because that when he committed those sins, he felt so guilty in doing so that he turned to God and asked for forgiveness, and he was restored. And because of that forgiveness and restoration, then he was able to worship God and be so grateful for that forgiveness, and his life was completely transformed. And I think anybody that turns to God that's sincere can be going in one direction but end up going on the right path.
Yeah, but he asked God for forgiveness, and God forgives him without a sheep sacrifice. God forgives him without a human sacrifice. However, God punishes his child. If you read that narrative, you'll see the full story that his child was the one who was punished, basically.
Because there's still consequences for your sinful actions.
Yeah, but that consequences going to your child is not something that is easily palatable for a God who wants to establish justice. So I don't believe that that God is unable to forgive you.
If a nation sins, anyone within that nation faces the consequences. So it's the same in a family.
Yeah, but a
That's what I'm
nation
saying.
cannot sin. It's always the people who sin. A nation cannot sin.
Sure.
A nation is an abstract.
Yeah,
It's the
but this
people
nation,
who.
this nation is sinning. Before God, we're in a wicked way.
Yeah. If you talk about the majority people.
So when judgment falls,
Yes.
God's judgment falls, anybody within the country is going to face judgment. Just like in the days of Noah.
Of
the
Sodom
old-
and Gomorrah.
The old world was flooded,
Well,
wasn't it?
we also believe the flood was local, by the way.
It's a different story.
It's a different narrative that
Because
the Muslims
anyone
have.
within the world, the old world, died. Apart from people in the ark.
Yeah. By the way, when Allah brings upon a judgment on people, like the flood, or like the brimstones, or like the, I don't know, the earthquakes, or whatever it is, those people, especially that time, the prophets used to warn them for years.
Absolutely.
In the case of Noah, for centuries.
Yeah.
And after that, they remain indifferent, then they are only to be blamed.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, those people who are there, they will also fall, they will also be
Sure, they
taking
were
the
babies.
judgment.
Were there not babies in the flood?
Yes,
The
but this
fire?
is God doing it,
See what I'm
remember?
saying? Yeah, exactly.
Yes, but in the case of David, who is a prophet of God, for him to commit deliberate adultery and deliberate murder, so the person whose wife that he actually lusted after, he sends him to the forefront in the battle, gets him killed, and then he commits adultery with this woman of his. That is not only deliberate, but that is, I think it's something which he had planned intentionally to do this. It's more like a conspiracy. Yes, and the thing with the other prophets committing incest and so on, you know, it goes against the character of prophets. The whole purpose of God sending prophets is to do what? To send them as role models, to show the people what is good and what is forbidden. If they themselves indulge in these forbidden things, then who's going to believe them?
Even Noah,
Who's going to
when
take
he
them as
was- he was
seriously?
drunk and
Yeah, I know. That's why I said I didn't want to get into the
Oh,
details.
well, you don't believe in that one either.
No, we don't. Are you surprised?
chosen people.
Why are you
Yeah,
surprised?
but some people would say that sounds good, but
What sounds good? Incest? Where are you coming from, bro?
And this incest, that's where Jesus came from. All this genealogy.
But it's honesty, and so
No, I'm
therefore-
coming to that, wait.
And so therefore, you can, if you are unhonest,
Dishonest.
sorry, thank you, dishonest. You can either say whatever that person does is not wrong. That's one way of being
Are you talking about predestination?
Wait, no. Forget about getting into the details. I'm just keeping it simple here, okay? Or you can just ignore what he done wrong and not talk about it. So what the Bible tries to do is not do that. It can be wrong and say, no, these people should be better than that. At the same time, so for me, I see it as 2 points. But I
Wait. Shall I give you a third alternative? You give two. Shall I give you a third alternative?
and that's the point.
Or maybe somebody else has been
Exactly.
acting
That's the
this
third
way.
alternative.
Maybe.
Doesn't like
Maybe.
Solomon. He said when he
Maybe.
was old, he
Maybe.
came out making sorcery, all kind of things.
Yeah.
And so
He
that's
lost
one
faith
of
in
the
God,
greatest-
And
basically.
see, but that's
Because he
what.
was
According to the
enslaving
Bible, yeah?
the Israelites.
Yes.
Obviously they had to.
And do you know what
And
Judah?
that's the difference between
Have you
us and
heard about
that.
Judah? Judah is
We see
supposed to be.
reality. We believe it to be reality, which is human being sin. And so, therefore, we don't. Wait a minute. We don't have, like when you walk into a Catholic church. I used to be Catholic. They have statues and they have an idea of how these saints used to be. That's not what the Bible paint. The picture the Bible's painting. But as a human being, I get that. Well, it should be like this, and I get that. But at the same time, and it's valid. But that's basically what the Bible says.
No, but there's one thing you're not taking into account. We are talking about messengers and prophets
Yes.
who are direct link with God.
Yes,
So it's
absolutely,
not talking
yeah.
about some layman who's committing adultery or
Yes,
fornication.
yes,
So you need to,
yeah,
you really
yeah.
need to take into account
Yes,
because
absolutely.
those people were not only, according to the Islamic narrative,
Yeah.
not only protected from sins, but they would never indulge in these sins. For God would not let them do it. Because then, what is the point? It's kind of a failure
That's a
on
belief.
God's part.
That.
Because then
Find
he's,
me
the
somebody who
people
doesn't
that
do
he
it,
tells-
I'll believe it.
Bro, I
I'll
listen
tell
to you
them.
without interrupting. Okay. So when God Himself sends these people as His representative, yes, then whose failure it is if they commit the sins? Exactly. So when you have, imagine you're an ambassador.
Yeah.
You go to another country representing this country.
Yeah.
If you do anything wrong, whom will they blame?
Of course.
The country you represent.
Yeah.
Similarly, the people who represent God directly, they will not only blame these people, but they'll blame, oh, look at your representatives, what they're doing. And that is exactly what they tried to do during the time of, was it Noah? Yeah, it was Noah, isn't it? When these two angels came, and Lot, during the time of Lot.
Abraham and-
Yeah, so when these two angels came who were very handsome, and everybody was lusting after them, these all guys who were,
Sodom and Gomorrah.
yeah, who wanted to sodomize them. So this is exactly the same thing. God protected Lot, protected these two angels from that, from the sin that they wanted to commit. So anyway, we digress. So going back to the sin, I'm saying God has every ability to forgive sins and to punish the wrongdoers. He has got both these abilities. There is no need for God to make someone a scapegoat like Jesus Christ on the cross. And to me, that seems not only unjust from God's perspective, who has always been telling people from the very beginning till the last revelation that he is the just. He is the judge of all the judges. And if such a judge and such a just being then brings into something as a doctrine, as a main key core belief, what he had prohibited before, what he had actually rebuked people for before, what he had completely rejected as coming, even being a thought to him, we cannot say that the same God would do something as prohibitive as killing an innocent being for the sins of mankind. If God wanted to punish them, because after the Christians believe this, correct me if I'm wrong, even after they believe in the sacrifice of Jesus, they still have to repent to God after they commit the sins. So we're back to square one.
But isn't God forgiving people the same, breaking the same logic that you're saying? Let's say I'm a king, and he comes to me and he says, I've raped a woman. I'll say I forgive you.
No, it doesn't work like that.
Wait.
You didn't hear me.
So
you didn't hear me. Remember
okay.
I said God has the ability to forgive and to punish.
Okay.
You didn't listen to the second part.
So yeah, I did. But what I'm saying is,
so God, just because somebody commits,
no, I understand.
somebody commits rape doesn't mean he's going to be forgiven, even if he asks for forgiveness.
But what if God forgives him? That's unjust.
What do you mean?
If
why would God just forgive a rapist?
Yeah.
If a rapist is going to rape people, why do you think God will just forgive him?
That's why he said
it doesn't work like that. No.
that's what he said.
But I never made that point. So it's a straw man.
Yeah,
if I made that point, yes.
Man, I'm coming in your logic.
No, my logic is God punishes.
If you do a crime, then you can't be let off.
Well,
and so forgiveness is what Jesus.
Okay, hear me out. I think I know what you're saying. So there's a difference between major sins and minor sins. We need to keep that in perspective. Okay. So if you go to the court of law, yes, there are many times the judge would forgive a first-time offender.
Okay.
But would he actually forgive a first-time murderer?
But that's not unjust.
No. You're not understanding.
Off.
You're somehow.
His logic.
No, you somehow think all sins are equal. They're not.
Okay, so you do believe in that logic. You just believe it in a different percentage.
No, I believe that every sin has a different degree. There's a different degree of sins, and there's a different degree of doing good deeds. They're not all equal. Otherwise, it'll be unfair to God for God to actually put people in the seventh heaven and some other people in the second heaven. You know what I mean? If all the good deeds are equal, then they should all be in the same level. Same thing in the Jahannam. They'll be having different degrees in the hellfire, where they'll be burnt and tortured more or less depending on the degree of the bad deeds you have done. So you have to bear that in mind.
Get away from the punishment.
And by the way, I'm not saying every bad deed.
So I like his logic. So therefore, there should be no forgiveness.
No, there is no. There is forgiveness because forgiveness is a part, it's an attribute of Allah. Allah says, "Huwal Ghafurur Rahim." Ghafur means the one who forgives. Rahim, the one who shows mercy.
He believes in it.
No, I'm saying there are sins. Look, there are sins, for example.
This is if you do sins between you.
I wanted the Christians to be around, guys. Come on, this is your topic. All right, no problem. So inshallah, we'll come back. Are you a Christian, my friend? Yeah?
So you believe that God will forgive?
God sends another one. Thank God.
You believe that God will forgive?
My name is Hashim, by the way.
Oh, Jeff.
Jeff?
This is my first time being here, so...
You're not one of those different denomination of Christianity, are you?
Well, there's lots of different denominations. Yeah, I am.
You are... Wait, don't tell me. Not Jehovah's Witnesses. What's the other one? Mormons.
I am.
Gotcha. By his uniform. He's got a uniform. They always come in. They're very gentle creatures.
I'm not a missionary. I just came.
No, that's fine. That's fine. But you get trained.